Alex Hanstry here, coming to you January 15th, 2017. I'm often asked what I think about intentional communities, or some people will use other language like Earthship communities, and so I'm going to be polite to the new viewers that are not familiar with my content. But anyone really familiar with my content who's not a new viewer would realize that I'm such an independent person, and some of the ideas that I express are actually very controversial. And so when it comes to intentional communities, the question is, can you conform to the expectations of today's man or woman? Today's man or woman or man that may be in control of said intentional community. And so from the get-go, I'm going to let you know that it deals with personality types. And it's not all positive or negative, but rather certain personality types. Some people are able to operate as a hive mind or a collective. And some people almost seem to show some sort of psychological need for that, or a need for a sense of community or family. And we don't have to be judgmental of those individuals that are seeking that. I think in that reality of people living together that aren't hurting each other, maybe some people lived alongside abusive situations, and they want to see people simply getting along without having to need to, get drunk or call the cops. So, I'm going to tell you that there's a part of me that would like to see that, but there is not a part of me that needs that. You could say that there's a part of me that's evolved beyond the need for that, and I will say that there are a lot of people out there that spread their arms in a big hug, going, intentional community, hubba, 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 come on over here. And there are certain people out there that get involved in organizing their own communities because of their own particular interests. And this is, some could argue this is a rule of thumb. And I'm going to be fair and just simply say, hey, you know what, from my experiences and what I've seen, it's been my lesson to become independent. Sure, it helps to have a ride into town. I am coming to you from off the grid. I am on a hill. I've been here for half a year, and this is a very snowy part of the country. And so it's not uncommon for there to be snow on the ground leading into April, leading into late May, with even some snow coming in June. So it helps to have a 4x4 that I don't have. I am, developing some friendship with someone else who's going to come up. I like developing friendship. And I like the idea of doing future building projects. I like the idea, most of all, of, you can even call it intentional community based around independent media, because, we should put out there, if you will, what we want. But we also want to learn from the mistakes of others. And I certainly have seen that some people that desire intentional community have tendencies to be dependent on others, or don't have confidence in some of the basic skills, or just simply in themselves to get through certain situations. And that could be as simple as being able to be alone. And some people aren't able to do that very well. And some of us, we have a little bit more experience being alone because perhaps we've been alone in some way, shape, or form most of our lives. The idea of being lonely in a crowded room or in an urban city, that sense of loneliness, yet you're in a city or a metro area of 1 million plus. See, I know what those feelings are like, having been in those shoes. Hell, I even know what it's like to be on Access TV, to be one of the few in my community in Portland, Oregon, speaking against the left-right paradigm, and to still feel that sense of loneliness. And so, for me, it's been a journey to become more independent. It doesn't mean that, somebody can go indefinitely without supplies or other people, but when you have strong opinions or spiritual ideas that most of the population is programmed to shun. When you're in my situation, intentional communities with people that are different than you is not recommended because of the judgment. Now, let's say that you're the type of individual, and more than likely, those types of individuals aren't really listening to YouTube channels like this. But let's just be hypothetical. For a few of you in certain situations, an intentional community may work out very well. And I can talk about certain things without insulting you. And I can let you know that certain personality types are going to be more open and welcoming to certain types of communes. Now, I'm not against the idea of people working together. I just have seen what it's really like when you have multiple people living together on an off-grid property, for example. And if those are spiritually inclined, it can actually be very noisy, I've noticed, for people that are on the spiritual path, for them to share the same space. Sometimes people really need to be off the grid to be in their own actual physical space, to be doing their own work, and to be not mixing their own work with others. And even less so to be in a situation where you're being dominant to others about what is the nature of reality. Lest we get into situations, New Age communities, where you have goddess worship, or you have people literally giving their energy to, say, the organizers, the couple. This isn't limited to New Age either, and I've talked before, for those that are new listeners, about the differences that I see between spiritual concepts and teachings that are timeless, that are not New Age, but are really old age, like the best of the old age. Oldie but goodie. And so certain things really shouldn't be repackaged as New Age when they are traditional spiritual teachings and ideas. I liken a lot of the New Age stuff with having a positive view of ETs instead of a more suspicious one. So that's one of the ways in which I label New Age circles, and also false claims of a collective shift in consciousness without putting the emphasis on the individual shift in consciousness. So I told you that to let you know that I'm not against spiritual concepts for the new viewers. There's going to be a few. The New Age communities usually have things centralized. And some of you know exactly what I mean. Or things will revolve around the organizers or the couples. And there are some women in our society that will use their physical beauty and their popularity and their materialism to encourage others to give them energy. It's almost as if they are a front for something else. Now, with regards to some men, you're going to have issues, and there's always going to be issues with some men. They're going to use their position as a landowner to see what they can get from the visitors, to present themselves as the dude. I've seen one particular individual, I believe he was bisexual. This was back in Oregon. And this was back in 2014, and I messaged a friend, told him that I was looking for maybe places where I can do some legitimate garden work in order for a place to pitch my tent. During that period, I was sleeping in the back of my truck, and it was during that brief home free period. So this person was also being listed on the woofing website. And in no way whatsoever did I see any standards or things that, okay, so what is required of someone to thus be listed on the woofing website, which basically gives you access to a lot of free labor. People that are traveling, people that are hungry, people that don't have a lot of hope, people just go, hey, have you thought about woofing? And what that really is, if it's not organized, is indentured servitude or worse, weird situations with weird people. And I saw with this particular individual, and I was drawn to check out his camp because, his property, but it wasn't even his property. It was a test project on his parents' property, and he seemed to be going through the members, as I said, as a horny bisexual human being. Hey, red-blooded human. But if you're going to have an organization, separate your personal pleasures and your intoxication and alcoholism and things of that nature from, say, an organization associated with woofing. Whether it be called wolfing or woofing, that's not really the point. If you know what I'm referring to, then you're aware that there are organizations that come across as a stable place to stay. Hey, just put in some work, and it could be a situation where you're literally tenting in the mud and working full time. If you're desperate and you need to stay there, and there are people that will consciously or unconsciously take advantage of that. Now, if you're already on the spiritual path and you're male, and let's just say you have aspects of your masculine side still intact. Let's just say you haven't been completely feminized, and I don't mean that to be insulting to those that are in tap with their feminine side. I believe that as heterosexual men, we can be tapped into. I only speak for heterosexual men. I can't speak for those that are experiencing other things. Although A lot of the spiritual concepts that I discuss apply to all. So if you're very independent and you really are, and let's say you're a teacher, let's say you're someone like me, and someone could look at your information or material as quote unquote controversial. In some quote unquote intentional communities, that's not going to be welcome if your energy, your ideas is going against the current of the energy that has been established. And it doesn't have to be a right thing or a wrong thing. It just is, to see reality as it is. If you're a very strong personality and a strong man or a strong woman, and you are obviously also thinking outside the left-right paradigm, and so your conversations aren't obsessed with holding up some political candidate. Instead, you more or less are speaking your own truth. Well, your own truth can be really offensive and can create a rift in some of these intentional communities. And so you should know that there are certain rules of thumb. Hey, it would be great to have, say, the best date and the best dinner and to be living the best place all the time, right? But we know that life isn't like that. And relationships aren't like that. So within intentional communities, just like intentional relationships, you're going to come across a mix of individuals. And you may find that in some intentional communities or places where people are able to come and go and there are really no standards and it's completely open, you're going to find the types of people that gravitate to those groups are certain personality types that you would not particularly in some cases identify to be truly independent, but codependent. Now it could be subtle, it could be codependent because they need people to socialize with around them. So they maybe have certain personality quirks that are based around that, or based around social approval, or based around acting like they're your friend, even if they're not really your friend. Hey, can I get you something? Hey, I'm making food, everybody. It's time for it's lunchtime. Hey, everybody get up and eat at the same time. And there's awkwardness in that because then you start sharing energy. Well, hey, if someone's going to be sharing food with you, you need to share with them. That's a basic rule of thumb. So that means in a lot of intentional communities, there's not your food and their food. There's our food. Of course, that doesn't work out very well if it's all set on the right premise. But then if you have somebody going, okay, who's making me dinner? And see, that's not something that I can do. It's enough for me to be a single man and have all of my responsibilities. If it was close like family, although I've never really known such an experience, I've been on my own a long time. I guess I've known concepts such as family when I was younger, much, much younger. But the idea is if we're going to act like family, I'd like to really be closer to those people. When you're sharing energy, and that includes sharing the marijuana pipe. In a lot of these intentional communities, when there's the sharing of the marijuana, and I do smoke marijuana, but I prefer my own pipe and my own energy. When you are sharing in such a thing, such as everybody's mouth going on the same piece, so everybody, in a way, having lip to lip, tongue to tongue, if you will, mouth to mouth, a connection over and over with the pipe, they are in a communal way sharing energy. Now, do you really want to share energy with all of those random people that are coming and going? Because you're going to find that in a lot of the intentional communities, a lot of broken, lost souls. And so we talk about also big cities, people that want to live in the big cities. So the macrocosm version of this is like people that move to Portland to be part of this larger so-called intentional urban blight situation. That is a much larger concept of an intentional community that's all based around the buzz of the hive mind of a particular city's energy or frequency. You have households that come up on the radar that are mentioned. For example, there was one person that was he was actually quite rude. He's no longer a Facebook contact, but there are certain people out there that like to send their friends off to like other rainbow houses, and they want to hear positive feedback. And it's like it was a really depressed experience visiting that place in Paonia. I'm sure somebody even knows who that place is. And even the guy that owned the house, that had people coming and going, there was something really strange about him. And I'll notice with some master manipulators, there'll be something about me that they don't trust when they initially meet me. But I didn't feel like hanging around there, around the dude, because I tend to steer away from people that have this kind of, hey, we're all paying tribute constantly to the guy who runs the house, and there's a weird kind of worship energy, whether it's male or female. I've seen it duplicated many times. I've mostly seen the version of the male worship. The female worship is very much integrated into much of our society, or the false goddess worship. Worship me. Look, I'm so beautiful. Look, let's mix it in with spirituality. Hey, it's a chakra clearing session time. And see, I'm all about clearing one's chakras and grounding meditation. And I'm telling you, in my analysis of some of the mainstream New Age communities, as opposed to communities really coming together over selflessness and spiritual concepts, I'm seeing how people's energies can be co-opted when they align their chakras or energies or singing bowls that om with others. And so if you have certain humans that are basically being used as hosts by spiritual parasites, and we'll be brief on this, but some of you are already up to speed with this. Intentional communities is a great way for those spiritual parasites to obtain energy. And then also the drama that goes on in some of those households that tends to bring people in. And then, of course, the hooking up quickly with people and the breakups and other things and dramas that are going on behind the scenes in these intentional communities. And spirituality goes multiple ways. There's a form of higher spirituality, and then there's a form of spirituality, I believe, to where your spirit is siphoned on, where something is vampiring on you, where there's that form of spirituality and being one. And that type of being one isn't very comfortable. And do we need to be one with all spirits on this planet? To a degree, there's a reality that we're all like from this oneness or all interconnected. We are. And a lot of my work with regards to the solar flares affecting human consciousness and earthquakes and cycles of war and peace deals with this oneness, interconnectiveness principle. This material I get into in my other videos. But do you want to become one with someone that is playing host to something else? That is in their own vampiric mindset of use people? Of not really being in their own happiness and in their own space, but looking outside of themselves, the next fix, the next hit, the next boyfriend, the next this, the next drink, or, for some men, the next girlfriend, addicted to that physical sensation. And so they find themselves dependent and codependent on a variety of levels. Even to the tune where you have like a full household, I'm not knocking it necessarily, but you have a full household of people, say, on food stamps. And still this sense of lack. And this sense of trauma and drama. And so, whether they be like an Occupy house or a Rainbow house, unless you vibrate like them, you're going to be treated as a now. If you do vibrate like them and you do use certain buzzwords, and in New Age circles, by the way, a popular buzzword that I do not associate with is star child, indigo child, or crystal children. The ego-driven ways of defining ourselves is very indicative of this Western culture, which is in decline. And there's a lot of people out there that act like they're being alternative, but they're not being alternative. They are still heralding those not so attractive aspects of egoism. And so with the egoism, you see a lot of counterfeit goddesses that want to redirect the energy to them as they create the us versus them. They're the enlightened ones, and the rest of the world is just all fucked up. But they've got it figured out. The sharing, you mean the taking, when you actually look a little closer. Now I'm going to shift gears on this note. In my heart, I hold on to this idea of maybe intentional community isn't it's definitely not the right word or verbiage to use, but something that a conscious expression of that would exemplify. Where people are working together towards a common goal, or where people are coexisting in a peaceful way without need for welfare, without need for law enforcement, like a small collective of individuals that are able to bring some goal alive. But the thing is, when you're dealing with people of a higher caliber, they tend to be more independent. And then whether I like it or not, anytime that you're really dealing with a couple, oftentimes their life is what is most important. So, you may see couples involved in intentional communities. If they're organizing it, the question is, what do they get out of it? And there is a sense of power that does come from, and first of all, if you're in a relationship, and this is the most unromantic time to be alive, that puts you in your own social category. And there's almost this unspoken thing with people that are in the relationship that they come first and then the world. And I'm not here to argue whether that's right or wrong, but in this world of animalism, that's how things go. In this world of tribalism. And it can be very sad to the single man, for example, to see his male friends spending more time with their girlfriends or wives, but that seems to be tribalism. That seems to be nature. Why fight it? Although it may trouble us at times. And so those types of politics are also going to potentially cause rifts. Can there be balance on some level between people that are already involved in their own relationships and others if they are truly of higher consciousness? And if they truly are, they don't need a rule book. They just are able to do it naturally on their own without it being taught to them, without it being a learned ability to literally respect others and want others to basically respect you on a basic level. So I've come across a lot of these intentional communities where I basically was not respected. And I'm not getting long-winded about this, if you're noticing that. I'm giving you a lot of information in a short period of time, periods in which people maybe thought I was a cop, or my appearance was that of someone suspicious, like an investigator, which is really not that far off from the truth. I'm not a cop, but I am an investigator of all things mystical and things known and unknown. Not all things, but many, many a great things. And this, to be truth. And so I feel like people with a lower level of intelligence or people with spirit attachments, whether it be at the Rainbow Family Gathering, they may look at me like I am some potential threat to them or on the other side. And having been, and you're going, Alex, this is just so, it's also been brought to my attention repeatedly, this is very strange for others to hear. So that's why occasionally, this is the only time you're going to hear it in this podcast, but occasionally I will mention the fact I'm half Middle Eastern, half white. I look physically different than most of your peoples. And I speak very differently. In mind, body, and spirit, I am very different than most of your society. And most of you would not deny this. So when I am amongst mass consciousness, unless they are automatically of higher, and a lot of you have a habit, unfortunately, of really giving people credit where they don't actually receive it or deserve it because of the way that you personally may have been treated by that group. And so you're comparing your experience to me. But we are very different people. And I come loaded with 3,000, 4,000 videos. Someone may look at and go, well, that guy is crazy because he believes in X, Y, Z. So unless you also come with that level of controversy, there's going to be certain things that some of you out there, especially those of you that are pretty young girls, where you're, for really a physical reason, you're more accepted in those environments where the juicy, attractive, sensual, even motherly, it may not even be a sexual thing. You may have just had a child in the last year, and so you're and I've noticed this in women that have recently given birth that are exploding in physical beauty. There's something very beautiful about that, and people want to be around that. They want to be around that mother energy. Maybe there was something that went wrong in their life with their own mother, and so in a way, it is really like the goddess is appearing in their life, or the closest thing to the goddess, an attractive female that is about to give birth or just gave birth, that is exemplifying the love-giving vessel. People confuse it for the goddess, and so they fall into worship mode. But it is something to be in awe of. Life and those giving life, which is why I speak so much against the apathy regarding millions dead. If you're going to be in appreciation of the goddess energy or spirit, why be silent about the millions of dead Afghanis and Iraqis? So that would be my controversial side. I cannot be alongside counterfeits. How can you say you respect the feminine and the woman when these forms of life over here that have been brought to this world by women took them 9 months to carry this baby? 9 months. only to see them drone attacked by our own military and to act like things have changed, or we're on the verge of changing, or we're changing in the last 8 years, or about to change now, either because of something happening politically or some channeled message from the so-called Galactic Federation of Light. Maybe someone's feeling the burn. Yeah, they may be feeling the burn, but not disgusted by the drone attacks, which burn is okay with. So, these are core reasons why intentional communities are not for me. But they may be for those that are of the physical kind sought by the intentional communities. Maybe you have a skill. Maybe you have nothing whatsoever, but you need a safe place, and you have a skill, and you are a male. And so in a way you can be used. You can allow yourself to be used in a way to where it's an exchange of goods and services, repair, build, work, our grunt. Just got to be very careful what situations you get yourself into. Working 8 hours a day and having to provide your own food so you get to sleep in the mud is not a good trade. That's all this guy had set up when I visited his woofing thing, in Oregon. Then I saw him get drunk and, saw him and, plot his plans. He already had a girlfriend, but, he had obvious signs of sex addiction. And he seemed very, like he wanted to see how relaxed I was, with him with his shirt off. And if I had any of those inclinations towards men, for example, or bisexuality. See, when you go out there in the intentional communities, you're going to come across all different things, just like you're going to come across all different things in the Rainbow Family Gathering and the different cults or clubs or tribes, if you will. They're doing their old tribal competition at the Rainbow Family Gatherings, if you've noticed that, if you've gone. And it's also very, very strange. I went there once, and the depth of conversation, the lack of depth was very disappointing. And this cult, like, welcome home, brother. And if you didn't say it just right, like the way people may look at you, or certainly the way people looked at me with my short haircut and my appearance, it was anything from a full-on Anglo-Saxon hippie man. When you're a mixed race, clean-cut man in a full-on Anglo, and this is the truth, and there could be some blacks and Hispanics involved, but it's always dominated usually by a particular ethnic tribe from Europe. And what you need to understand, instead of this knee-jerk reaction, like, what am I hearing? What am I hearing? What you're hearing is that from a Middle Eastern / Anglo, for some of us that look certain ways, we don't fit the type of the hippie dude. People treat that with suspicion. At some point, your society or aspects of this audience are going to have to come to face the truth. Steer away from words like racism if they make you feel uncomfortable. Stick more with these words like tribalism, which many amongst your kind tell you is the right way to go. But I've learned that the dudes, with the dreadlocks that are playing into this whole like Tarzan look, the long hair, but really, like, if I were to be like that, people would be making Osama jokes because of my genetic code. My beard comes across very differently than, say, the Adam Kokesh beard. And so intentional communities are perfect, say, for the men and women that look the type to be the perfect tribal members. And what they're really doing is they're creating something that they feel they need to create because of this, descending from Europe, coming into America. And there are some on the alt-right that are crying about the horrors of the white genocide in a less white world. Now, they may not be consciously of that mindset. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but on a biological level, there is this desire to return to the trees and return to their tribe, and then become stronger as a result. But in deciding who is their tribe and who is not, there is judgment based on physical appearance, whether you admit that or not. And it is notified in just the look. And I keep thinking dreadlocks, and more dreadlocks on the men and on the women. And it is a look. And it's not limited to white or Caucasian or European. You also see dreadlocks on those that are of African descent as well. So there is a tribal aspect of it. There are certain intentional communities, and I've just mentioned like one kind out of many. But what you need to know is some of it is based on superficial. Some of it is based on false goddess worship or the dude worship. There might be a dude running around acting like he's the Big Lebowski, or, that's a nice way of putting it. But I've seen some pretty unfavorable men running around like they are these perfect gods or goddesses that are enlightened, that are, if only people would just join their club. And then, of course, there are the scam artists that will ask for money for people to live on their property and give them free labor. And so if we were to go into the conversation of scams that are ongoing, I could talk about Vince Edwards in Costilla County. And he was putting out an offer, just so you know, this scam did work on several people. So even though if it sounds crazy, there are some people that are hearing what the guy's asking for $2,000 and he's saying, you'll never have to pay another bill again. Now think about the concept of this, and wouldn't there be some sort of credentials required? How would you know that it's not some person off the street asking for $2,000, $3,000? And you're not really dealing with something that far removed with Vince Edwards from Costilla County. I don't know if he's still there, but he was putting the word out. Give him $2,000, $3,000, live with him, do labor on his property, which is in a state of disarray. He hasn't really built up any compound or anything. He just dug a broken RV halfway into the ground. And so, really like, you're talking like Slaptown level construction with tarps and pallets. We're not talking like regular building. We're not talking like, going with a few bucks and building an actual shed and building the beginnings of a home. We're dealing with, come over here with that fucking broken hammer and help me build my shanty town, after you give him the $2,000. And then the guy promises, well, you'll never have to live again and pay bills. You can just live with me. Well, even if you liked his personality, which is just impossible. Nobody hangs around there longer than... you have the issue of the county going after the actual landowner because Vince is just making payments. And so what the county does is they put a lien on the land when the land is in violation and you got weird shit going on or stuff's in violation, whether we agree with that or not. So if someone's going to be in a position of taking money, shouldn't that money go to then getting within code so you can actually grow your organization and not just going to buying more crap or whatever $2,000 would go to in a week? The other thing that I want to mention is people have asked me often about what I think about Earthship communities. And I'm being respectful. But I'm thinking about people that I'm imagining have never been off-grid or reading some sort of magazine. A lot of people don't realize that there's off-grid intentional community stuff that's marketed towards the wealthy. There's also something called an RV park where you can pay up to like $400 or $500 a month just to live. And there'll be people saying, well, you can use their internet. You get your fucking you get to plug. Well, what if you're already independent? What if you already have your own internet and solar panels? Why would you then pay someone else $500 a month or $450 a month just to park your RV there? See, that doesn't make any sense, does it? So there are intentional communities that you can move into, like Taos. Now, there's several communities, but is that what you want? Do you want to move into a community where you have people that are... the term that people often use, although I don't really like labels, but what is the term? It's not hipster. It's so early in the morning. But when you talk about the urbanite, yuppie. Yuppie is the term. You have certain areas like the Taos Earthship community, which is the higher end, not to be confused with the Mesa, which is like the ghetto, where there's like title disputes and you have people just squatting everywhere. You have a higher end area, which is a Earthship community, and it's like $25,000 for an acre there. Is that what you want to put down? And do you want to live in an area where the price of the land keeps going up, so the taxes will keep going up? Well, what's your interest? Do you want to live alongside nature, or is this about you investing in real estate? Now, if it's not about you investing in real estate, gravitating towards established Earthship communities is not the way to go. It's going somewhere else where there's not a lot of activity. But you also want to stay away from investing in areas where it's a ghetto, going your own independent way. You can go your own way. You can also end up in a really fucked up situation. So it's gonna take time and research. You're not going to get away from the due diligence aspect of research when it comes to buying your own land. But this is mostly about the intentional community warning. And I'll mention this briefly. In the 1980s, my mother was also very involved with the New Age movement in Seattle. And I believe that that was not as it seems. In other words, I don't believe those aliens they believed they were channeling were benevolent. And so when you hear me talk about Archon mind control, or the idea of the mind virus, the idea of the alien invasion taking form through telepathy, through humans receiving messages that they think are from the Creator or from the angels, that are in fact from something else. And so this has really been on the backdrop for a while. A lot of people have not acknowledged this. And it's really the truth, behind the scenes, behind the music, regarding a lot of these New Age intentional communities. There was always a purpose for them. To tell these people, you're ascending, you need to be here at this particular moment. We need your bodies here, and in a collective, focusing your attention towards this. And it's like, whoa, boy, does this seem familiar. Boy, does this seem like a trap on lower level intellect, low intuition human beings that don't understand their own power, that their own power is being redirected. Even their own sexual energies, for those that are targeted, those get the love bite. You're the chosen goddess. We need you for a very special task over here with this group. And they think, meanwhile, they're working with ascended beings, working up towards the heavens. In reality, they're working with the archons. And some of them will admit it, and they believe the archons are good now. I've actually, remember trading messages with a woman that was an intentional community in Ashland, Oregon, where there was like a lot of that cult energy going on. And goddess worship, and you can even call it sexism. Yes, the women know best, and the men are these dogs that are down here, and we are the ones we've been waiting for, as they literally prance around and shaky. So hopefully I gave you some things to think about. My idea of a situation working with others, it would really revolve around not just, sitting in just a bunch of flowers, doesn't it feel so good to just be here? Like, well, I don't know, lady, this isn't my first lifetime on Earth, so I'm not just simply having a mind orgasm by literally having the bare feet on the ground. But I can see how for some souls, just simply being on Earth now seems like, oh God, it feels so good to get out of hell. Like, I don't know. But I can tell that there's a difference between you and I. What I want to do is use the media, use the internet to actually reach people around the world with information and ideas. So my idea of an intentional community would not just be growing food and have maybe a few people around that are friends, like 5 to 20 people, something low. We're writing books, we're putting together magazines, we're using off-grid technologies and power to power the computers. So really multimedia, from print to websites to video to radio or podcasts to other. But really, I'd like to see, before my lifetime is over, that type of intentional community to where it's almost as if Alex Ansary is destined to work with the best, or the very best and brightest minds, both male and female, and with their genetics more than likely being from all over the world. And it not just being this thing where everybody looks like they're part of the same tribe and they have the same, they're sitting there smoking some great bud, man, with some big fat dreadlocks. That's not for me. But clearly, that is only the thing for some other people. And dude, don't talk so deep, Alex. Dude, you need to fucking hit that shit, bro. You need to fucking hit. I did hit that shit, dude. Fuck off. This is me, I am free. May I one day know what it's like to quote unquote be a member of a intentional community. But I don't think that we would call it that. I don't think that we would put a label on it. I think it would just be. And perhaps some of you are waiting to see some of the things that I've warned you about come to fruition. You're just not sure yet how right I am, and you're waiting. Perhaps I have a whole different future waiting for me after my 50s if I make it that long. But we'll talk about it then. For now, this is Alex Ansary, January 15th, 2017, on intentional communities isn't even worth it. Well, first you need to know yourself and know what's out there, and then you can make a better determination if it's right for you.